Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are from here at our Open Learning Campus. This is a webinar series on public-private partnerships, identification and screening, methodologies, tools, etc. Today's webinar will be on South Korea, or the Republic of Korea. My apologies. Today with us we have Hae-young Kim. Hae-young is a principal policy advisor for the Global Infrastructure Hub on secondment from the Republic of Korea. She also has worked with the Development Institute for Public and Private Infrastructure Investment Management Center in Korea. Also with us today, we have Morag Baird. She is also working at the Global Infrastructure Hub on secondment from the United Kingdom Department of International Development. So welcome, ladies, and I'm going to turn over to Hae-young for her presentation.
Hi. My name is Hae-young Kim, as introduced by Rob. And let me briefly introduce Global Infrastructure Hub. Global Infrastructure Hub is an independent organization established by the G20 countries and funded by various countries. So we have a very ambitious program to increase the flow and the quality of opportunities for private and public infrastructure investment in G20 and non-G20 countries. Today, I will present PPP project identification and feasibility assessment and BFM assessment in Korea. And this portal is our country's very symbolic landmark as a gateway to our country that connects with the world. This is the Incheon International Airport Expressway. This project is the first private investment PPP project rightly after the 1994 PPP Act enactment. I'm very delighted to share my experience in Korean PPP identification and selection scheme with you. Okay, let me introduce the background for PPPs in Korea. The legal inception of PPPs was in 1994, and we have PPP implementation type, both user-paid type and government-paid type. The user-paid type is named as BTO or BOT or BOO, and the government-paid type is named as BTL. We have more than 600 projects since 1994 until 2015. The majority project is in transport sector. So today's my focus would be in transport sector PPP project. We have an independent PPP unit. It's named Korea Development Institute Public and Private Infrastructure Investment Management Center. So I call it in this presentation as KDI-PIMAC. Okay, this is an overview of our identification and PPP screening process. In Korea, the whole process flows from the project identification and feasibility assessment, and the final stage is BFM assessment. For the project identification, both solicited project and unsolicited project is accepted in Korean PPP Act. And the feasibility assessment is KDI-PIMAC screening process. So the KDI-PIMAC uses the Analytic Hierarchy Process-based decision-making process. So as I will explain in detail further, this AHP decision-making process consists of economic, policy analysis, and balanced regional development analysis. Okay, first stage is a project identification stage. So the first type of the PPP solicited project identification is made by line ministries, especially Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. They have a hierarchical infrastructure plan, the highest level of national core transport network plan, and their multi-level, lower-level infrastructure plan. And they also have a mid-term investment plan, and they have its individual sector infrastructure plan. So in this infrastructure plan, the line ministries prioritize the investment, and they are building project pipelines, and they also are seeking the investment efficiency through the PPP alternatives. So for this infrastructure planning, they devised their own methodology that consists of economic analysis and comprehensive evaluation. And in this stage, they are conducting a financial feasibility test for PPP. And after the Line Ministries infrastructure plan, PPP unit reanalyze just in case large-scale project and above the preliminary feasibility study threshold. So the KDI PIMAC uses the unified methodology in feasibility assessment as public financing project and PPP project. So both public financing project and PPP project are subject to economic analysis and policy analysis and balanced regional development analysis for feasibility assessment. And after the project is decided as feasible, then the project is subject to the suitability test for PPP. And the other type is the PPP projects identified during budget allocation. So the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, they conduct PFS for large construction works under the National Finance Act. So the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, they made a linkage between budget process and PPP identification. So if the Ministry of Finance receives the budget allocation from the line ministries, the Ministry of Finance should request for PPP suitability opinion to KDI PIMAC. And as per the Ministry of Finance request, PIMAC mandatorily review the project PPP suitability during the PFS. And as I mentioned before, the PPP unit uses the unified methodology for public financing project and PPP project. So the feasibility assessment is the same standard as the public financing and PPP project. And recently there has been some arrangement because the more PPP projects needed to be provided into the market. So the Ministry of Finance provides some detailed review standard for suitability for PPP during PFS. So previously, The PPP stability test is done on by way only checklist, but recently every PFS project, that means the public financing project, should be subject to BFM assessment during the PFS. This is an unsolicited project identification. So private party can propose their proposal based on their business judgment and voluntary search. And competency authority, if they get the proposal from the private party, then unless they exceptionally they need to reject the proposal, they must send the proposals to PIMAC for review. And KDI PIMAC use the same standard as a solicited project and also the same feasibility assessment as a public financing project. And the feasibility, I'll go to the feasibility assessment. This stage is very important and decisive phase because the PIMAC screens the project from the national economy view, and so if the only project which passes through the feasibility assessment then goes to BFM assessment. So the PIMAC assess the feasibility about on solicited and unsolicited project. Unlike the solicited project, which only large-scale project should be subject to PIMAC's review, but all unsolicited projects are subject to the PIMAC's feasibility assessment. And the feasibility, as I mentioned before, the feasibility assessment is very important to whether to keep going to the BFM assessment or the project should be rejected. So the analysis for feasibility assessment is very strict and very comprehensive. So we use the analysis of economic, policy, and the balanced regional development element. So the PIMAC member, normally 2 members, and outside experts, normally 2, and independent advisors, 1 or 2 members, consist the analysis team for feasibility assessment. And after the analysis, the decision-making process is followed. So we have the quantitative element and qualitative analysis element. So we needed to structure and organize the assessment analysis element. So we devised the Analytic Hierarchy Process. Yeah, this is the slide to show how to structure AHP element. So the main objective of this decision making is the overall feasibility. So for this overall feasibility, the AHP structure decomposes the high level element and the sub level element. The most high level 1 is the economic analysis and policy analysis and balanced regional development analysis. And for the policy analysis, we have sub level 2 element. It's consistency with the higher level plan and project risk and impact of employment. And we have all third levels questions is conformity with the relevant plan, a strong political will, and preparation degree, and availability of funding, and environmental effect. And also in the sub-level 3, under the balanced regional development analysis, we put the level of the regional development and ripple effect on regional economy. So to evaluate how this project is feasibility or not, the high level and sub level analysis element is structured by AHP. And each analysis element is weighted and scored. The more big weighting has placed on economic analysis. So in that 40 to 50% of weighting should be placed on the economic analysis. And policy analysis weighting should be 25% to 35%, and balanced regional development weighting placed around 20 to 30%. So in for each element have their own weighting, and each evaluator assess the feasibility for each analysis, and each analysis element is independent. So the final goal is to decide the overall feasibility decisions. It is necessary to avoid arbitrary decision. So we organize on 6 evaluators' response because the highest and lowest evaluator are needed to be excluded. And so after the analysis, the final feasibility assessment is based on the consistency between evaluators and the AHP scores. For example, if the 6 evaluators all agree with the project implementation and AHP score is higher than 0.5, the project is decided as feasible. But if only 3 evaluators agree with the project implementation, the AHP score should be much higher than 0.58 to be feasible. So for the overall feasibility, we organized and structured each evaluator's response and their judgment. So so after the feasibility assessment, only the project which is decided as feasible then proceeds to VFM assessment. In the VFM assessment, we conduct quantitative VFM, and also we conduct the qualitative VFM. So in the quantitative VFM, we compare the government cost under PFI and under the PSC. So if the total government cost under PFI incurs less than that under PSC, it is decided the PFI has value for money. And the government-based cost is calculated to reflect some risk adjustment. For example, the risks relate to the cost overrun, which incurs under the traditional procurement and are quantified to the PSC. So we have the quantitative VFM analysis. Also, uniquely to the unsolicited project, the PFI is adopted from the private partner's proposal, but we re-estimate the demand element and applied to PFI so that the PIMAC can analyze how much governmental cost would incur under the new re-estimated demand. This is a qualitative VFM analysis. After the quantitative analysis, this element is also considered whether the project can proceed to the market as a PPP project. The first element is eligibility for PPP. This issue is related to, is included in the eligible infrastructure facilities under the PPP Act, and also the objective of the project clearly stated, kind of thing. And the second element is effectiveness and public interest. In this element, we see does this project can induce the competition in the market. And the third element is the facilitation of a PPP implementation. Is there any political, social, environmental aspects of a PPP project, especially user pay or government pay type? We needed to review whether user pay PPP can accepted to the users. And we can also review the impact of risk allocation. The PPP project risks should be transferred to a private party. We can also ripple impact the project influence on greater competition, and we needed to review some unique characteristic for individual project. Yeah. So if the VFM assessment is completed, then PIMAC conclude whether this project can proceed to the market as a PPP or not. And this is my conclusion of today's presentation. The key features of Korean identification and screening scheme. The first one is unified framework between public and private financing project in identification. So both public and private investment project should be subject to strict economic analysis and policy consideration. And also the unique character is the Ministry of Finance role in the project identification, and the linkage the line ministries investment plan and the Ministry of Finance's budget management plan. And the third one is the feasibility assessment by the PIMAC. The PIMAC is the unified framework between public and private financing project. This scheme provides a clear justification to PPP project because the feasibility assessment is done from the national social economic value. So this scheme fairly judge both traditional and PPP project. So it could provide a clear justification to a private investment project. Also, I want to say about independent PPP in its role. So KDI PMAC are doing research continuously on devising a quantitative analysis, because quantitative analysis can minimize the arbitrary decision of the evaluators. So we are doing keep and researching on the how to calculate and quantify the social economic value of the project. Okay, thank you for listening to my presentation, and I wanna make room for my colleague Morak Baird for her insight on this slide and experience.
Thanks very much, Hayoung, and greetings to everyone who's joined the webinar. Yes, the Global Infrastructure Hub has been working together with World Bank on a number of these case studies now. And the Republic of Korea example has been an interesting case study, both in terms of their experience on the number of PPPs. They're almost up to sort of 700 projects now. Although it's still one form of approach, there's still a lot of publicly funded projects. But also from the use of really quite structured tools compared to other countries, which we've looked at in other places I've worked. They have, quite a structured process working through the project identification, feasibility assessment, and value for money assessment. The roles of the different agencies has also been interesting, and the Analytic Hierarchy Process has brought together both how to look at sort of public projects and the sort of PPP approach in a consistent manner, considering wider aspects, which are interesting in terms of lessons learned, like the geographic spread and the sort of impact on employment. The roles of the different agencies is something I find has been slightly different than other case studies, and also which stages of the process it's been considered, and the role of the agencies at different points in developing the pipeline. So thank you very much, and we very much look forward to the Q&A. Okay, I think over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, ladies, for the presentation and reaction. I appreciate that. You made my job much easier by seamlessly sliding one into the other. So we are at this point going to open up for, please write questions in the chat box on your screen, but also we have some polling questions. The first polling question right now is, who do you think is in the best position to identify whether a project should be adopted as a PPP or not as a PPP? And I'll give you a couple seconds to answer this question. It looks like we have some going back and forth on answers here. Thank you very much, Hayoung, for a great presentation as well. All right, it looks like the polling is closed for this question here. All right, the choices were a PPP unit, the line ministry, the finance ministry, or the planning ministry. So it looks like we have a 2-to-1 split. 2/3 of the people responding voted for the line ministry. 1/3 voted for a PPP unit on who would be the best to identify. Hayoung, do you have any reactions to the response?
It is interesting. The PPP or non-PPP approach is related to various aspects and is related to various stakeholders' interests. So I think the PPP unit has the advantage of its expertise knowledge and their accumulated experience, how this project is working at the market. So the PPP unit has the advantage of expertise knowledge, and maybe they have more information about the PPP market. So I think the PPP has some advantages to identify PPP or non-PPP approach. And I think the line ministries is also has their own view about PPP or non-PPP approach. The line ministries' advantage is to they are building the project pipelines and they establishing their infrastructure plan. So their main issues is to how this pipeline flows to the market and investors. So I think the right minister's role is important, but um, it is very interesting. Nobody answers C or D. Yeah, so I think the finance ministry has also some advantage to identify public financing or PPP projects. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Yes, and just thank you for centering too, so we can hear you um, perfectly. That was a great answer. We often have this debate in a lot of our work of who is best to identify projects, and we'll come back to that in the discussion period. This next polling question, audience, if you could feel free to answer, is in your opinion, what percentage of PPP projects are being selected globally, primarily on the basis of political considerations? 20%, 50%, 80%. So this is a very interesting question. I think after having looked at several different countries and economies and approaching it, um, this will be an interesting discussion point as we go forward. So if you all please take some time to answer this question. I think we're wrapping. It looks so far 100%. The polling is closed for this. 100% say 80%. So it seems Hayoung that the majority of the participants believe that it's mostly a political consideration when selecting PPP. What are your reactions to this?
Yeah. It is interesting. Yeah, I also think the every infrastructure project, including PPP project, is decided based on the politically driven decision. So that's why every country wants to make clear criteria for project selection. So in Korean case, we to analyze the feasibility of a project, the PPP unit continuously developing and updating the methodology how to reflect the economic value and policy consideration or other main objective of the project. So to avoid the politically based biased decision, our country and our PPP unit are updating and researching under clear criteria which standard and which criteria should be applied to selection of PPP or other infrastructure project.
Thank you. I think we'll probably dive into this a little bit more in the discussion period, and we can talk about, Morag and I can probably bring up other examples of how you could maybe take the politics out of this decision making process a little bit more. But I think Korea has a very good approach to handling this. We have the next polling question up. If you could all take a few seconds to answer this question. What is the most important element to ensure that after a contract signing, a PPP project is sustainable to the end of what the planned term of the contract is. So, and the answers for this are significant social and environmental benefits from the project, economic viability, financial viability, or continuous risk management. And as this question is, as you're answering this question, or as you've already answered this question, please feel free to type in a question for the discussion period that's going to immediately follow this question. I believe this question is the last one. Okay, we've closed this, and it seems, Young, you can see an interesting spread here. Most people think it's for continuous risk management, some on the financial viability, and some on social and environmental benefits of the project. What is your reaction to this, and what was your thought process when you were developing this question?
Yeah. I thought each answer should be answered by very equally. So very interesting to there is no answer, no mark to the economic viability. So I think the economic viability is a little related to significant social and environmental benefits from the project. So in my country case, economic viability, to the decide the economic viability, we analyze the various social and environmental aspects and benefits. So yes, so and also the financial viability is the very critical because every investor or its stakeholders from the market pay attention to projects' financial viability. So I think the financial viability is also critical issues. So it is very interesting to majority answers thinking that continuous risk management is the most important element for the sustainability. So the continuous risk management is from the identification phase to the whole cycle of a PPP project. The risk management should be continued by public sector and private sector. So I think the continuous risk management through the contract or other measures is very important for the sustainability. And also, I wanted to talk about my point of view. From my point of view, the social consensus is a good element to keep the PPP project sustainable. The social consensus is drawn by investors and public sector and private sector. Also, we needed to keep eye on the civil society or users infrastructure. So I think to draw social consensus of the PPP project, from the identification and selection pages, it is very important to comprehensively analyze the PPP project's the selection considerations. So I think the continuous risk management is very important between public sector and private sector, especially under the PPP management. And overall, the social consensus is very important to sustainably the project to be kept and until the end of the contract term.
Thank you very much. Please feel free to ask questions again, and we'll try to address all of them as we can. So we're going to open up the discussion period here. You touched upon this a little bit in your presentation, but we had two questions that arrived prior to this webinar. One was how by Naran Seg, how do Korean ministries assess unsolicited proposals? What is the achievement rate and implementation rate of unsolicited proposals? So you touched on this before of unsolicited proposals. Just how they are assessed and identified. I believe you were discussing that they're assessed similar, but the identification process may be different. And then just what is the success rate of unsolicited proposals once they're put forward as a prospect? How many reach financial close, and then how successful are those projects?
So let me clear your questions. So are you asking how many unsolicited how much ratio of a unsolicited project amount in my Korean market?
Yes, I think that would be a good starting place, and we can move on.
In Korean market, the in user pay type PPP, we call it BTO. Most projects are implemented by the unsolicited project. So almost 90% of BTO project is unsolicited project. And also we have some unique involvement from the unsolicited project scheme. So until the 2015, in the government pay type PPP, the PPP Act does not allow unsolicited project, but this year the PPP Act was amended to allow the unsolicited project to government to pay type model. So I think from this year, the more private parties proposal would produce to unsolicited project in the government to pay type model.
So, and then I think following on this, how are unsolicited proposals identified? The private participant, do they submit a proposal directly to a line ministry? Do they send it to KDI PIMAC? How are unsolicited proposals identified?
Yeah. For the unsolicited project, private parties submit their proposal to line ministries, and the private parties' proposal is based on their they are watching the infrastructure plan published by line ministry, and they can see the project pipeline. So they can also they can search for voluntarily other PPP project. So the proposal by the private parties is wholly on their business judgment, but in generally the private parties proposal is based on the right ministry's infrastructure planning and project pipeline.
Excellent, excellent. That answers the question very clearly. Another question that was submitted prior was from Emmanuel, and it says, which PPP project development methodology is used in Korea? Well, I feel like that question you answered with your entire presentation, so I don't think you have to go into that one. We'll move on to the next question. This one is from Ibrahim. Why is a balanced regional development a key factor in project feasibility assessment? Is it a political or is it a social license consideration?
I think it is consideration of our country's geographical consideration. So because our territory is very small, but the development and degree is very different from region to region. So the metropolitan area is highly developed, but the less developed area needed to be evaluated or added some points. And this element is also devised on the basis of equity, because the BC analysis is a big element to decide which project is feasible or not. But BC ratio is wholly dependent on the demand. For the traffic demand is can happen very big in the metropolitan area. That means that metropolitan area can get a higher BC ratio. So the less developed area needed to some adjustment or some bonus point for their the fair analysis. So that's why we devise the balanced regional development. I don't think this is the political consideration. It is just kind of equity consideration or fairness consideration, I think.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. One question also is from Motoko on how do you engage members of the public throughout the PPP process?
PPP in the PPP identification and PPP screening process, the analysis and evaluation is wholly managed and controlled by PPP unit. The other public officer from line ministry is not engaged in this feasibility assessment. So the PIMAC members and outside experts and independent advisors only participate to the evaluation. And this analysis result is can be a recommendation to Ministry of Strategy of Finance.
So following up, the analysis that's done or the process that projects go through when they go through identification and screening, for example, at the very beginning, line ministries, do they make public what their infrastructure plans are, so that may engage so that the public knows what is going on. Also, when the projects go through the analysis, are the results of the analysis made public on a website or something, so that the citizens of Korea have an idea of what is going on?
Yeah. Yeah. I needed to clearly divide the public financing project and PPP project. The KDI PMAC, after the analysis, all the public financing project feasibility assessment result is published through our website and is open to the public. But for the PPP project feasibility assessment and the BFM assessment is not published through PIMAC's website because the Korean market has many majorities unsolicited projects, so the analysis result can be related to commercial interest of a private parties proposal. So that's why we do not publish the BFM assessment through our website. But I think generally the public and users or citizens, especially under the regional residents or regional stakeholders of the specified project are very sensitive about the feasibility assessment result for the especially on public financing project. And also PPP project, the citizen and the regional residents are very keen to how this project is going and how the KDI PIMAC decided whether this project is feasible or not. So that is the issue we are focusing how the KDI PIMAC needed to let the public citizen to be informed or whether we needed to focus on the commercial interests of private parties proposal. So yeah, that is the issue, and we are struggling to what is the best way to let the citizen be informed about the PPP project.
Okay, thank you very much. I was wondering if I could bring Morag in for some discussion as well. Hello again, Morag.
Hello.
So one of the questions that was brought up by Haeyoung's very interesting polling questions that she put together for this webinar. One of them was on the whether or not identifying or selecting PPP projects is a political decision. And I know you have done some work in reviewing a lot of different countries' PPP identification and screening protocols. I was wondering what sort of sense you get for where Korea falls in. Just to expand upon this a little bit more, as you know, for example, the UK and Victoria and Australia, all projects are assessed the same, and it's sort of a method of which procurement style would be the best value for money. In the Netherlands, for example, all of the projects that go into the pipeline have passed a 70% vote by the Netherlands Parliament in order to even be considered for infrastructure, and that sort of takes out the politics because it has such a super majority. That may not be the case in a lot of our client countries where politicians may be pushing their interest to get a project through to see a project implemented. So I was just wondering, from your perspective, how does Korea handle this issue?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think it's true to say that anywhere in the world, I mean, infrastructure projects by their nature are political. They are big, expensive, visible projects which people will have an opinion on. And it's also important to note that their timescale is much longer than most political cycles. The impression I get from Korea compared to other studies is they are more proactively supporting the PPP process. They seem quite, enthusiastic. But at the same time, it's worth to note that it's not it's not that everything is done through a PPP. It's no magic bullet. It's still, a relatively, small proportion of the whole. It's interesting also that the Ministry of Finance is getting a say, even if the line ministry is putting forward to a project as a public project, then the Ministry of Finance, can take the opportunity to say, well, yes, but can PIMAC assess the suitability of this as a PPP? So yeah, I think the interest seems a bit higher than elsewhere, but they are making this effort to, as we say, take the politics out of it, but it's not so much take the politics out of it, but make sure that it's sort of consistent politics and politics that will survive transitions, whether it's just of individuals, because each individual will have their own view, etc., by setting up a sort of clear process through which that's taken. And they've even sort of structured how they deal with difference of opinion on a specific project in ruling out the highest and lowest score, and then having a different score that has to be reached depending on the sort of variance of opinion.
So another question. A lot of countries and a lot of people watching this webinar might come from a country where the budget maybe is not as strong as it is in Korea for this dedicated PPP unit and this large staff to assess projects and go through. So I was wondering if you had any ideas of what sort of key lessons learned from the Korean approach could other countries, maybe countries with not as extensive a budget, could learn and maybe try to implement in their own way for their own PPP processes?
I think the fact that they are actually assessing both public and PPP approaches through the same sort of quite rigorous feasibility analysis is a good approach, regardless of where you get the budget from. That's, a bad project with a bad economic analysis will remain a sort of bad project. How you then factor in the sort of social and environmental issues into your environmental analysis is could be a whole debate in itself, but it's an important one. And I think the fact they have dialogue going on between the different ministries is an important aspect as well. It's important to separate out sort of the idea of finance and where you get the money from the idea of actually the long-term funding of the project. How is this paid back through user funds or taxes? So it shouldn't be just considered, a way of getting some finance together.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. We have just enough time to sort of wrap it up. So I was wondering if, ladies, if you could both, maybe starting with you, Morag, and then ending with Hae-young, on just sort of final thoughts from this webinar.
Final thoughts is that there is a lot to think about. The range of dimensions that are brought into the South Korea assessment is quite appreciable, and they take those forward at different levels. They have a very structured approach. I think there's sort of debates in other countries as to, whether structuring it to such a degree is always useful, but at least it's, transparent. So that's a sort of discussion that could be had further. And the simple pointing out that it's not all about the finances. Also, something that didn't come up in Korea is they were really looking at their demand forecast, and even if a project comes in as an unsolicited project, they don't just take the private sector's word for it. PIMAC does quite a detailed demand forecast of their own, which is then used in their analysis as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my presentation. And the Korea key features of a PPP project identification and selection is the dedicated PPP units role to keep researching and updating their methodology guidance tool. So that's why the PPP project can draw the social consensus from the public. So thank you for listening to my presentation.
Oh, thank you very much, Hae Young, and thank you very much, Murag. I think this was a great discussion. It definitely was a wonderful presentation as well, Hae Young. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure we all appreciate that. For all of those of you out there, if you please take a few minutes to give us some feedback on how this webinar went tonight, and please, if you're interested in any of the other Open Learning Campus webinars, please feel free to join. The next webinar in this series will be on December 13th, and it will be on Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, one of the states in the United States of America, on their approach to identification and screening. And that will give you a little bit of a flavor of how maybe this process is different in a federal system. Other than that, thank you very much for joining us again. Please share this webinar with your friends and coworkers. You have a wonderful morning, a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful evening, and good night.